Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump unveiling the price and timeline for building a Golden Dome missile defense shield for Americans. Why he says it could save lives and how it could block threats from communist China. Iris Tao at the White House. Secretary of State Marco Rubio testifies before two Senate committees today. Some lawmakers press him over cuts to foreign aid, while others praise him for carrying out the president's policies. Jack Bradley has the key takeaways. While testifying, Rubio defends President Trump's Ukraine policies. International leaders, meanwhile, weigh in on Trump's handling of the war. Arian Pazdar has the Ukraine update. In Israel, trucks continue carrying humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip for a second straight day. But some countries have now threatened to take concrete actions against Israel, saying the current flow of aid isn't enough. Jason Perry reports. And President Trump making a trip to Capitol Hill to rally support for what he calls the Big Beautiful Bill. He says the bill contains the largest tax reduction in history. David Lamb brings us the latest.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. After signing an order in January to start planning a Golden Dome missile defense shield for the U.S., President Trump today unveiling new details, including its cost and timeline. The unprecedented project comes amid warnings that China is developing new missiles to threaten the U.S. homeland. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. Tell us more about the Golden Dome.
Good evening to you as well, Tiff. So President Trump on Tuesday unveiled more details for his Golden Dome project, which the administration envisions as a multi-layered missile defense shield system that could protect Americans from missiles, all kinds of missiles launched from pretty much all around the world. Here's what President Trump said about it. Watch.
The Golden Dome will be capable of intercepting missiles even if they are launched from other sides of the world and even if they are launched from space, including hypersonic missiles, ballistic missiles, and advanced cruise missiles. All of them will be knocked out of the air.
Now, President Trump says he's asking Congress for a $25 billion initial investment for this massive project as part of his Big Beautiful Bill, and that the estimated overall cost for building this whole project would cost about $175 billion. And as for the timeline, President Trump says he expects this project to be fully operational and completed by the end of his current term, which is in about 3 years or slightly more. And now there are some concerns, though, about how exactly expensive and difficult this whole process will be in building out this system. But the administration sounds confident that they can get the money from Congress and also help from some tech companies. Watch.
Some funding is tough and some is easy. When we say we're going to save everyone's lives in a crazy world, it seems to be very easy to get.
Some of the new defense tech companies that are very interested in it and can bring missile defense at a cost that I don't think, you said it, Mr. President, is unimaginable in terms of how much lower the cost is.
And this new investment comes as U.S. military leaders are warning that adversaries, especially China, are building out new advanced missiles that are meant to breach the current U.S. air defense system. And also, according to a chart published by the Defense Intelligence Agency, China may already have a conventional missile that could strike Alaska. And General Michael Goodline, which is the Space Force's Vice Chief of Space Operations and who Trump is tapping to lead this Golden Dome project, today warns that the U.S. must close such loopholes. Watch.
We have been focused on the peace overseas. Our adversaries have been quickly modernizing their nuclear forces, building out hypersonic missiles capable of attacking the United States within an hour. It is time that we change that equation and start doubling down on the protection.
And now this Golden Dome missile defense system might not just be for the U.S. President Trump says Canada has called to want to be part of it because they want protections as well. And Trump says the U.S. is working with Canada on the pricing as they will need to pay their fair share. Tiff.
All right, Iris, thanks for that update. Secretary of State Marco Rubio testifying on Capitol Hill today at the State Department's budget hearings. Lawmakers using this opportunity to address key concerns over department cuts and foreign policy changes. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley joins us from the Senate Rotunda. Jack, what came out of the hearings?
Well, a lot, actually, because this is the first time Secretary of State Marco Rubio is testifying before the Senate after he was confirmed by the Senate with a resounding 100% yes vote from both sides. But since then, the department's faced a round of cuts and foreign policy changes and a complete restructuring to the department. Many lawmakers on the Democrat side were concerned that the department's cuts, which reach almost up to 50% of the department, could limit their power, limit their ability to make influential decisions and humanitarian aid abroad, and meanwhile let China grow its ability to influence nations abroad. Secretary Rubio said that that would not be the case because China uses its Belt and Road Initiative, which we know is a series of infrastructure projects across many different countries, but many times it doubles as military installations of the Chinese Communist Party in those countries, and also leaves them in debt traps, what's known as debt trap diplomacy, making these countries pretty much subservient to the Chinese Communist Party.
This administration has eviscerated 6 decades of American foreign policy investments.
Even with the reforms we put in place and what we're suggesting is changes to our foreign aid, we still will provide more foreign aid, more humanitarian support than the next 10 countries combined, than the entire OECD, and far more than China. China doesn't do humanitarian aid. China does predatory lending.
So Secretary Rubio also mentioned the importance of lifting sanctions and engaging Syria. Lifting sanctions on Syria is what Trump did last week. He also met with the leader of Syria, the first leader after the ruling Assad regime was changed back in December. And under the previous Syrian government, the current administration says that that regime allowed terrorism to thrive under them. And now with this new regime change, it was vital for the U.S. to provide support and lift sanctions so it could prosper, because what Rubio says is that they were on the verge of collapse or a possible civil war.
Frankly, the transitional authority, given the challenges they're facing, are maybe weeks, not many months, away from potential collapse and a full-scale civil war of epic proportions, basically the country splitting up.
Now, Rubio also cautioned that a deal, an Iran nuclear deal, would not be easy to achieve, as Iran has a red line that it wants to keep its civil nuclear program, and the U.S. does not want Iran to enrich its uranium, which could be used for nuclear weapons.
Our hope is that we can encourage them to show them a path towards prosperity and peace that allow them to develop their economy, that allow them, if they want, to have a civil nuclear energy program like other countries around the world have without enrichment.
Now, before that hearing this morning, Rubio remarked with an opening kind of joke saying that I'm here on behalf of the National Archives. But that's because he's the head of the National Archives, the Secretary of State, the acting National Security Advisor, and also the head of USAID. So really busy guy testifying up on Capitol Hill today. Back to you.
Also in his Senate testimony today, Rubio defended the Trump administration's handling of the Ukraine conflict. Meanwhile, international leaders weigh in on the role the U.S. plays in bringing peace. NTD's international correspondent Arian Posdar has the Ukraine update.
There is no military solution to this crisis.
Right.
It will have to end in a negotiated settlement.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Tuesday, testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Rubio laid out what he describes as the main challenge in the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Russia wants what they do not currently have and are not entitled to, and Ukraine wants what they cannot regain militarily.
Some Democrat senators asked Rubio about the way the Trump administration has been handling the conflict. Many accuse Russian President Vladimir Putin of not actually trying to seek peace.
What Vladimir Putin is doing now is playing for time, and he's playing this president like a fiddle.
I disagree with this playing with a fiddle analogy, because the truth of the matter is when Vladimir Putin woke up this morning, he had the same set of sanctions on him that he's always had since the beginning of this conflict, and Ukraine was still getting armaments and shipments from us and from our allies, and the European Union is about to impose additional sanctions. This notion that, what has Putin gained throughout this? He hasn't gotten a single concession. He hasn't gotten a single sanction lifted.
And the more time he gets without additional pressure on Russia, the more incentive he's got to continue.
And meanwhile in Europe.
Let me first of all say that I'm really glad that President Trump takes this leadership role.
NATO chief Mark Rutte says he appreciates President Trump's role in the Ukraine peace efforts.
He basically broke the deadlock from day one when he entered into office in January.
But not all international leaders are praising Trump's handling of the situation. Western allies, including the US, have been calling for an unconditional 30-day ceasefire. Ukraine accepted the truce, but Russia, not yet. The US previously said there would be consequences if either party doesn't agree to the ceasefire.
So we want to see those consequences also from the U.S. side. We really haven't seen, the pressure on Russia from these talks.
Also on Tuesday, Russia says that Ukraine has to decide if it will cooperate in discussing a memorandum for a possible peace treaty. President Trump spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin for 2 hours on the phone on Monday. Putin then agreed to set up such a treaty with Ukraine. The Kremlin now says that the ball is in Kiev's court. The memorandum would include the principles of a settlement and the timing and definitions of a possible ceasefire. A Kremlin spokeswoman on Tuesday said this shows that Russia is open to negotiate peace with Ukraine. Ariane Pastar, NTD News.
In Israel, trucks continue to carry humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip for a second day in a row. But the UK, France, and Canada say it's not enough and are now threatening to take concrete actions against Israel. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
Israel continued to allow trucks carrying humanitarian aid to enter the Gaza Strip on Tuesday. Israel recently eased its blockade on the territory after 2.5 months to prevent starvation and also due to pressure from allies. But on Monday, the UK, France, and Canada issued a joint statement saying the new flow of aid into the Gaza Strip was inadequate. The statement also said that if Israel does not end its renewed military offensive in Gaza and lift its restrictions on humanitarian aid, then they will take further concrete actions in response. And on Tuesday, the UK's foreign secretary said they were suspending trade talks with Israel.
I say now to the people of Israel, I want a strong friendship with you based on shared values. But the conduct of the war in Gaza is damaging our relationship with your government.
A resident in Israel responded to the latest threats from other countries.
I can only hope that the war ends soon, that the hostages are returned, and that we can find a way to have good relationships with the rest of the world again.
And while speaking in Jerusalem on Tuesday, Israel's foreign minister said this.
This is a proud nation, an independent nation, fighting on its existence, and we will not get any dictates from outside with regard to our national security. Should be very understood.
His comments come as Israeli forces recently launched extensive ground operations in the northern and southern Gaza Strip. Israel's chief of the general staff conducted a situational assessment in the Gaza Strip and said this.
This is a war we did not choose, but one that was forced upon us on the dark day of October 7th, when Hamas attacked the state of Israel with unprecedented brutality. This was not a military assault. It was a horrifying crime against innocent civilians.
And he also reiterated Israel's goals of defeating Hamas and returning the hostages. In a recent interview on Fox News, Qatar's prime minister explained why they haven't been able to reach a ceasefire deal in the Gaza Strip.
A fundamental difference between the two parties. One party wants just to retrieve the hostage and continue the war, and the other party wants to end the war and doesn't think about the hostages.
And on Tuesday, he said that the recent talks in Doha did not lead anywhere due to each side's deep differences. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Attacks on key undersea internet cables pose a risk to a major NATO base in Britain. A retired Navy Commodore warns Parliament this could knock out base communications, which would take hours to restore. A NATO security director is calling for better surveillance of undersea infrastructure. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more on this story.
Around 570 undersea cables connect internet across the entire world. But there are growing concerns that these fibre optic cables are a critical point of attack or sabotage. Speaking before a British parliamentary committee, Retired Navy Commodore and Underwater Systems Services Manager John Aitken said this could leave a major NATO base in Britain in a difficult position.
If there was a coordinated attack against specific cables, then there would be a loss of capability which would take hours to restore. There is a reversionary mode that's available. It would not offer everything that's offered by those cables.
The Allied Maritime Command, or MARCOM, is the central command of all NATO maritime forces and is based in Herefordshire in England. Danish Navy captain and NATO Security Director Niels Markussen said the UK and many allies are behind the curve on the need to protect undersea infrastructure.
And we haven't realized how important this is and how important it has grown over time. We simply forgotten that.
He said security has for a long time focused on distant wars. Aitken continued the point.
I was in the Navy for 32 years. In the 32 years that I was in the Navy, the focus very definitely moved away from the North Atlantic and maritime security and on to wars in Afghanistan and Iraq.
In April, telecoms companies warned a rise in sabotage incidents is putting critical services at risk, potentially affecting global internet and power infrastructure, communications, and financial transactions worldwide. Their warning follows suspected Russian-sponsored attacks on undersea cables in the Baltic Sea. Aitken said cutting cables is a very blunt thing to do, saying there may be more subtle forms of attack.
You know, if you were able to interfere with timing signals in cables by altering the frequency or affecting the frequency of the electricity passing through a cable, you might be able to cause a degree of confusion within the banking sector or other sectors.
And he said he thinks the Russians likely have that capability. Markussen said there are around 200 undersea cable breakages each year. One of the most frequent causes is fishing gear. He said repair capacity can handle this level of breakages, but not if the level increases, saying NATO allies need to be much better at surveilling the seas and cable lines, and in particular, sharing data between nations, organizations and systems.
Because there is a lot of data out there, we just need to systemize that approach to it, and then we can actually make it very difficult for a potential enemy already with the things we already have now.
Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
President Trump was on Capitol Hill today trying to rally support among divided House Republicans for his multi-trillion-dollar budget bill, which he has dubbed the One Big Beautiful Bill. Some lawmakers continue expressing reservations about budget cuts and tax credits. NTD's David Lamb has more.
On Tuesday, President Trump met with House Republicans to get lawmakers to support a major budget reconciliation bill, one that's the foundation for Trump's second-term agenda.
It's the biggest tax reduction in history, biggest regulation reduction in history. Incredible for Medicaid, for Medicare. The only thing, we're going to leave it exactly as it was, other than for obviously waste, fraud, and abuse. We're strengthening it. We're going to make these things even stronger.
Trump said Republican lawmakers who vote against it could possibly face a primary challenge in next year's congressional elections. The bill would extend the 2017 tax cuts that were Trump's signature first-term legislative achievement.
Now, the budget has highlighted differences between fiscal conservatives and moderates, and this is over certain changes to Medicaid and the possible increase in tax deductions on a federal level to state and local taxes, which are also known as SALT.
The current cap on state and local tax deductions is $10,000. The bill would raise the cap to $30,000, but some would like it higher. Representative Mike Lawler of New York says he doesn't support the bill, hoping for a higher cap. Another topic of division is the timing of phasing out certain energy tax credits. Moderates, including Representatives Andrew Garbarino and Mariannette Miller Meeks, hesitated at the idea of cutting tax credits for shovel-ready projects that depend on them. It would also add tax breaks on income from tips and overtime pay. Speaker Johnson spoke about Trump's impact on the bill.
We're in a very good mood this morning. We had an epic time on the Hill. I don't think there's ever been a time when I've been more proud to be a Republican, to be an American. We're on the verge of making history here, and everybody feels it. In that room today with President Trump, it was filled with standing ovations and high energy and high excitement because everybody senses what's happening here. It was a great esprit de corps.
House Republicans were expected to unveil a compromised version of the bill later on Tuesday and for it to be considered by the House Rules Committee starting at 1 a.m. on Wednesday. David Lamb, NTD News.
Will Trump's visit to Capitol Hill turn the tide in favor of his big, beautiful bill? Find out at 7 p.m. Eastern with Colorado Congressman Gabe Evans on NTD's Capitol Report with Steve Lance. They'll also break down what's in the bill, from border security to Medicaid. Coming up, a jail worker is under arrest in New Orleans after 10 inmates escaped last week. What he told police and how long it took before anyone noticed they were gone. A hearing on Capitol Hill about threats to ICE operations after a chaotic encounter at an ICE detention center earlier this month. A congresswoman has been charged for allegedly assaulting immigration agents, while Democrats say those charges are political persecution. Luis Martinez reports. And the Trump administration is removing the first group of illegal immigrants who chose to self-deport. We'll hear from folks in D.C. about this policy when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A maintenance worker at a Louisiana jail is under arrest in connection with Friday's escape of 10 inmates. He says he helped because they threatened to kill him. NTD's Christina Corona has more.
Sterling Williams, 33, is under arrest after admitting he helped 10 inmates break out of the Orleans Parish jail. Deputies say the maintenance worker shut off water to a toilet that was blocking a hole in the cell wall, clearing the way for the escape. The group reportedly pried open a faulty cell door, moved the toilet, cut through steel bars behind the sink, and slipped through the gap. Graffiti left behind read "Too easy, LOL," with an arrow pointing to the hole. Officials say the inmates got out while the only guard on duty left to get food. It took hours before jail staff noticed they were missing. Williams said in his arrest affidavit that the escapees threatened to kill him if he didn't help. He also reportedly told police one inmate tried to grab his phone and asked him to bring a book containing Cash App information. Many of the escapees were jailed for violent crimes, including murder. 4 have been recaptured and 6 remain at large. Officials are citing multiple security lapses, including broken locks. Sheriff Susan Hudson, who oversees the jail, says she's taking responsibility.
As your sheriff, I take full accountability for this failure, and it is my responsibility to make sure it is addressed with urgency and transparency.
Williams faces 10 counts of principal to simple escape and malfeasance in office. Authorities suspect that multiple sheriff's office employees may have been involved. 3 have been suspended so far. On Tuesday, the first staff member was formally arrested. Christina Corona, NTD News.
On Capitol Hill today, lawmakers debated threats to the operations of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. The hearing comes after a New Jersey congresswoman was charged for allegedly assaulting immigration agents. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has the details on this story.
4 years and 4 months ago today, January 20th, 2021, Joe Biden made 3 decisions that created this mess in our country that we've had to deal with. He said, we're no longer going to build a wall. We're no longer going to have remain in Mexico. When you get here, you will not be detained. You will be released. Guess what? Everybody came.
Republicans want to see an increase to the detention budget of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency from $3 billion to $45 billion. But this Tuesday's hearing on threats to ICE operations centered on a single ICE detention facility, the Delaney Detention Facility in Newark, New Jersey.
From New York to California, local politicians are actively working to undermine federal immigration enforcement. Perhaps the most egregious effort is in my home state.
Congressman Van Drew is, of course, referring to the incident involving 3 Democratic lawmakers and the mayor of New York City at the Delaney ICE detention facility in Newark, New Jersey. Republican lawmakers played a video during the hearing showing when Congresswoman McIver was confronting ICE agents.
This isn't oversight. That's not oversight. That's obstruction.
She was trying to prevent the unlawful arrest of the mayor of Newark
And guess what? She was right, because the Trump Justice Department dropped all charges against the mayor of Newark.
New Jersey Acting Attorney General Alina Habba said in a statement earlier this week that her office attempted to come to a resolution of the incident with the Congresswoman without bringing criminal charges, but the Congresswoman refused the offer.
We've seen this administration come after and attack, leaders for doing their jobs. It's political intimidation, and I will not be intimidated.
President Trump commented on the criminal charges levied against Congresswoman MacGyver during his visit to Capitol Hill this Tuesday.
The days of woke are over. That woman, I have no idea who she is. That woman was out of control. She was shoving federal agents. She was out of control.
It's important to note that Republicans plan to include the increase to ICE's detention budget in the reconciliation bill. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The Trump administration has conducted its first charter flight for illegal immigrants who chose to self-deport. Dozens of Colombian and Honduran nationals left the U.S. yesterday with a $1,000 stipend. What do everyday Americans think about self-deportation as a way to enforce immigration law? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from them.
How would you rate President Trump's performance on immigration so far?
Very high. There's a path to get into the United States legally. Those who do it legally and come here and are constructive, productive, contributing citizens, I'm great with.
I can't help but think of Bishop Buddy on Inauguration Day, who asked Trump point blank to consider mercy.
I'm in favor of controlled borders, and I felt like the last 3-4 years was not working for the United States at all.
But generally speaking, like if you do commit crime, right, there are going to be consequences to your actions, right? And it's really unfortunate when families come over and the kids are subject to the same consequences as their parents. They didn't choose that. That's why it's really hard to have a really staunch opinion on one side or the other, right?
At the end of the day, it's still a crime, but again, with the families and everything, it makes the situation a bit harder to deal with. What do you think about self-deportation as a mechanism to curtail illegal immigration?
That doesn't sound realistic to me, but I'm happy for the wonderful people who say, you know what, I want to do it the legal way. It's interesting to me that the high percentage of people that live here as immigrants that say, we did it the legal way and we're against people coming in illegally.
On the surface, it sounds like it might have quite great possibilities, but anytime you deport somebody, the chances of them getting back, I think, are pretty slim.
It sounds like a second chance, right? Hey, you did something wrong the first time, we're giving you an opportunity to own up to it, and you can still come back in the future. I think that sounds reasonable.
But I think along with that, it would be nicer to have, I guess, a better way to obtain citizenship, at least less convoluted, a lot easier.
I'm all for it. Again, if they want to come through legal means, legal paths, I'm fine with that. And if they so choose to do that and get to the front of the line coming back, that's still better than somebody who gets deported forcibly and then turns around and comes right back. I heard a story the other day of a person who got deported and was back on the East Coast in 3 days. It's hard for me to understand.
Coming up, the Trump administration launches a special unit to target DEI policies on college campuses. Arlene Richards takes a closer look. Lawmakers are demanding answers from Harvard University over its partnerships with sanctioned groups, specifically organizations involved in the Chinese Communist Party's genocide against Xinjiang Uyghurs and forced organ harvesting. Sarah Parshall-Perry from Defending Education joins us to discuss. And should surveillance cameras be banned in certain spaces in rental properties? Congresswoman Nancy Mace says that she's been a victim of non-consensual filming in private spaces. Jason Blair has highlights from a House hearing on Capitol Hill when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Trump administration has announced further cuts in federal funding to Harvard. The Department of Health and Human Services is cutting $60 million in federal grants to Harvard University. It says the school failed to address anti-Semitic harassment and racial discrimination on campus. It's the latest in a wave of federal actions targeting the Ivy League institution. The Trump administration has already frozen or canceled nearly $3 billion in federal support, accusing Harvard of allowing discrimination tied to pro-Palestinian protests and continuing to factor ethnicity into admissions. Harvard denies the charges and has sued to block the funding cuts. calling them a threat to academic freedom. And House lawmakers are demanding answers from Harvard over partnerships with sanctioned groups, including those involved in the Chinese Communist Party's genocide against Xinjiang Uyghurs and forced organ harvesting. In a Monday letter to the university's president, lawmakers asked for documents and testimony before June 2nd. Joining us now to discuss is Sarah Parish. She's the Vice President and Legal Fellow at Defending Education. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you now. At heart is the accusation that Harvard trained members of the sanctioned paramilitary organization XPCC, a primary implementer of the CCP's genocide against the Uyghurs. First, how are you reading this whole situation?
Well, I have to tell you, it's incredibly damning for Harvard University, which is already facing quite a bit of federal investigation and federal interest, both from the Department of Education and the Department of Justice. But now what we're seeing from members of Congress is a revelation of jaw-dropping proportions. And this partnership with the XPCC, who is the primary implementer of genocide against 1.8 million Uyghur Muslims in the CCP, is really something to behold. Not only does it talk about some of the research that is transpiring, and this is research funded by an agent of an Iranian organization, the Iranian government itself, hosting and training members of other organizations who are China-based academics on policies related to scientific methods for organ harvesting. Now, that's particularly problematic considering the fact that we know organ harvesting is among the multitude of civil rights and human rights abuses transpiring against Uyghur Muslims and other ethnic minorities in the CCP. So why use a China-based academic to perform research on organ harvesting? It really does boggle the mind. Some of this research for China-based academics was transpiring specifically to increase paramilitary application and aircraft safety. I don't think we want a stated communist party and one of the SDP persons of interest listed under federal law as being an organization to watch because of their affiliation with the CCP. I don't think we want them doing research in a military capacity, and yet that's exactly what seems to be happening.
Expanding on that, if Harvard is found to have violated these sanctions, what is next for Harvard?
Well, Harvard, first of all, could lose its tax-exempt status because what it's doing right now is using Department of Defense funding, DARPA funding, as it's called, to be able to funnel much of this research dollar spending through China, to be able to receive a lot of these sort of particular purported academic research projects. That partnership with a known state agent of a communist country is something that's going to be, I think, something worth investigating on the Department of Justice's account and even the Department of Defense, who is going to be very concerned about what seem to be potential violations of national security interests in this academic partnership.
And Sarah, in the letter, the lawmakers called for comprehensive records of Harvard's dealings with sanctioned Chinese entities, full details on events involving CCP-linked affiliates, and disclosures of any CCP-sourced gifts or donations. Harvard has acknowledged getting the letter, but it hasn't commented on the specifics. Given the scope of the letter's requests and Harvard's recent tensions with the administration, do you expect this investigation to drag out or a quick resolution?
This, I think, is going to drag out just like the other investigations have thus far. It's clear that Harvard is staking a claim and it wants to make sure it can continue to operate under business as usual. Well, that is not the MO, the modus operandi of this administration. And they want to make very sure that for benefit of enjoying tax-exempt status, the dollars that are being spent by American taxpayers are not going to fund terrorist organizations or paramilitary organizations based in SDP nations, which are hostile to American interests. This is something that's going to drag on for a long time. The list of documentation requested by the 3 GOP members of Congress is extensive. It's going to require Harvard to go back to the drawing board and provide some very difficult explanations for why exactly it is in bed with this organization.
A lot to watch for sure. Sarah Parshall-Perry, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Staying with higher education, the Justice Department yesterday announced the formation of a new unit that will target schools with DEI policies. DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The unit will utilize a federal law that can pull federal funds from organizations that knowingly violate civil rights laws. NTD's Arlene Richards has the details.
On Monday, the Justice Department rolled out a new unit designed to root out fraud in colleges and universities. According to the announcement, federally funded universities that have diversity, equity, and inclusion policies are on notice. If they knowingly violate federal civil rights laws, such as allowing anti-Semitism on their campuses and promoting divisive DEI policies, the department will pursue claims against them. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said in a statement that the department's Civil Fraud Section and Civil Rights Division will work together to ensure schools uphold their basic obligations under federal civil rights laws. The unit will use a civil anti-fraud law called the False Claims Act to investigate and pursue claims if necessary. The act allows the government to recover funds lost due to fraud, and private citizens can also use the act on the government's behalf and potentially receive a portion of recovered funds. Blanche said a tidal wave of anti-Semitism has swept our universities, and that public institutions are systematically incorporating divisive policies at an unprecedented rate. He said the days of using federal funds to further discrimination are over. The announcement encourages the public to report instances of discrimination to the appropriate federal authorities. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Should surveillance cameras be banned in certain spaces and rental properties? Congresswoman Nancy Mace says that she's been a victim of non-consensual filming and that she wants to make sure privacy abusers are held accountable. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has highlights from a House subcommittee hearing on Capitol Hill.
Everyone has the right to be safe from prying eyes, electronic or real, in private places.
House lawmakers consider what can be done on a federal level to protect people from secret surveillance in private spaces.
Before me here on the counter, there are several devices such as carbon monoxide detectors, power adapters, and even a computer mouse, which is used for technical surveillance.
One witness says covert surveillance can be easily done using commercially available items.
And how this capability threatens the expectation of privacy in short-term and temporary rentals, such as Airbnbs, Verbos, and even hotel rooms.
The House Subcommittee's chair, Rep. Nancy Mace, says she's been a victim of unwanted surveillance.
I didn't know that I had been filmed. I didn't give my consent. I didn't give my permission. And this particular video that Patrick Bryant recorded of me on his secret camera, he saved for over 3 years without my knowledge.
And Ranking Member Chantel Brown says new technology has only made it easier for bad actors to abuse our trust.
When someone checks into a hotel or a short-term rental, they have a reasonable expectation that they will not be watched or recorded. It shocks me that we even need to have this conversation, but this is the world we live in.
Witness Joseph La Sorsa says he recommends federal lawmakers require full disclosure of all surveillance on any rental property, as well as ban devices in certain spaces.
Ban the use of surveillance devices in bedrooms and bathrooms of any rental or temporary living space, including common areas where sleeping or personal activities may occur.
Rep. Brown says there needs to be more detailed federal laws.
The lack of clear national standards allow platforms and hosts to operate under a patchwork of inconsistent rules, leaving consumers vulnerable.
Rep. Mace says that people can get devices to detect covert recording equipment.
You can get them on Amazon pretty cheap, and I've used them. And they'll find chips in places pretty consistently.
Representative Mace concluded by saying she'll be working day in and day out to protect victims and make sure perpetrators get justice. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Coming up in the NBA playoffs, it's Game 1 between Minnesota and Oklahoma City tonight. Dave Martin joins us to preview the action when we return. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on today, but let's start in the NBA playoffs as Oklahoma City hosts Minnesota tonight in Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals. What do you see as the keys to this series?
I think defense is going to be it. Both are very good defensive teams. Oklahoma City generally regarded as the best defensive team in the NBA. Now, they allowed their opponents to shoot just less than 44% from the floor this season. That was tops in the league. They also allowed the third fewest points in the league. Now, Minnesota, though, not far behind. They're 5th in field goal percentage defense, 7th in fewest points allowed. But Oklahoma City kind of separates themselves. They are number 1 in turnovers forced, and we definitely saw that against Denver when they forced 22 turnovers there. A lot of them live ball that led to a lot of easy layups there for the Thunder as they routed the Nuggets there in Game 7. Now, individually, the focus is going to be the 2 star guards there. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of Oklahoma City versus Anthony Edwards of Minnesota. I think it'll be very interesting to see if the Thunder decide to use Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to guard Edwards, considering he's the leading scorer in the NBA, because they've got some other options that can guard him. They've got several very good defensive players. Maybe they put someone else on Edwards just so they can let Shai Gilgeous concentrate on scoring. I'm just going to say SGA from now on. It's such a long name there. But anyway, keep in mind, though, Oklahoma City best record in the league this year at 68-14, but they only went 2-2 against Minnesota. So the Timberwolves definitely played them tough this year. Game 1 tonight, 8:30 Eastern Time, Tiff. So be sure to watch it.
Looking at the WNBA, league play started this past Saturday with a near record-setting TV audience involving Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, I don't think it was any coincidence that for opening day they had Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever facing the Chicago Sky and Angel Reese. And these two have been rivals going back to their college days. So they figured this would be a good matchup to start the season. They were definitely right. 2.7 million average viewers on ABC. That's the highest rated WNBA regular season game since Memorial Day of 2000. So 25 years since we've got that much of an audience. And that's despite it was a blowout game. Indiana won 93-58. Clark starred in this game. Both players actually did. Clark had a triple-double, 20 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists. You also had Angel Reese getting 12 points and 17 rebounds. And there was a little bit of fireworks between the two. They called a flagrant foul on Caitlin Clark. The tempers got heated there a little bit. Both said, though, after the game that it was just a simple basketball play. And they will meet again here soon. June 7 will be the rematch, and that will be in Chicago. So be sure to mark your calendar.
Shifting gears to tennis, the USTA announced a major upgrade of the Arthur Ashe Stadium over in Queens, New York, the site of the U.S. Open. When is the project expected to finish by?
Yeah, they are planning to have this done by the time of the 2027 U.S. Open. Now, here's the renderings of the campus here. This is the Billie Jean King campus over in Queens. That is Arthur Ashe Stadium. That is what they want to do to it. Now, Arthur Ashe Stadium, it's already the biggest tennis stadium in the whole world as far as capacity at just under 24,000. Now, as part of this upgrade, they're going to add more than 2,000 seats here. They're also going to have 2 levels of suites. They're going to upgrade concourses, dining places, and retail shops. Now, this is an $800 million upgrade. They said this is going to be non-taxpayer funded, though. They also said construction is going to be taking place in phases so that they can still host the 2025 and 2026 U.S. Opens without an issue. Of course, these are very popular events, Tip. The 2024 U.S. Open passed 1 million visitors for the first time ever. And actually in 2018, the Louis Armstrong Stadium, which is part of the Billie Jean King campus, they had a $600 million upgrade there. So the USTA must be flush with cash, so I must say. But I'm glad they're not using taxpayer funds for sure.
It's going to be like, you think any of those funds are coming from the Saudis anyway?
No, hopefully not.
Looking at the NHL playoffs tonight, we have a Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals as Carolina hosts Florida. Who's considered the favorite in this series?
Yeah, Florida is the betting favorite here. Even though Carolina actually has the home ice advantage, Florida is the defending champions. They added former Boston forward Brad Marchand just a couple of months ago. Now, these two teams actually met 2 years ago in the conference finals. Florida swept them, won all 4 games, but they won all 4 by just a single goal. 2 of them went to overtime, including Game 1, which went to 4 overtimes there before Florida won. So Game 1 is going to be tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern time. 4 overtimes. That's like a 6-hour game, Tiff. It's a lot of hockey, but I'm all right with it because sports matters,
Well, there we go. Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.